All right, so here we are looking at one of the popular emojis included with Apple devices. And I've heard from a lot of folks who are looking for high resolution versions of these things for printing on t-shirts or posters or what have you. But the truth of the matter is that these things are actually low-res ping files that measure 160 pixels wide by 160 pixels tall, and that includes this transparent region around the face. So what I've done is I've upsampled this image so that we can trace it inside of Illustrator, and that way we'll have a scalable vector-based design that you can do anything that you want with. And it's all shining and glistening, and that's because every single path outline is filled and stroked with gradients. And then later on, we'll go ahead and draw our own custom emoji, unlike anything else that's out there, because after all, not every day is deserving of this one. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to this base document here. And you can see, just to save us time, I've roughed in a few path outlines. Now I want to introduce that image we saw just a moment ago in Photoshop as a tracing template. And I'll do that by going up to the File menu and choosing the Place command, or you have that keyboard shortcut of Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P on the Mac. Then go ahead and select this classic smiley emoji right there and turn on not only the link checkbox, but the template checkbox as well. And then click on the Place button. And notice that tells Illustrator to automatically create a template layer below the active one. All right, I want to modify this layer a little bit by double-clicking on an empty portion of it to bring up the Layer Options dialog box. And I'll go ahead and rename this layer Simply Template, and I'll turn off the Dim Images checkbox, which will help us to better follow the colors in the actual image. After which point, I'll click OK in order to accept that change. All right, now switch to the Happy layer, and I'm going to go ahead and hide all but the outer path by marqueing them like so. And if you end up accidentally selecting the outermost circle, then just go ahead and shift-click on it to deselect it. And then go up to the Object menu, choose Hide, and choose Selection. Or you can press a keyboard shortcut of Control-3 or Command-3 on the Mac. And that should hide everything but the big circle. All right, now obviously this circle needs to be filled with a gradient, and there are a few different ways to accomplish that, all of which I'll review in this movie. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the circle with the black arrow tool to select it. And then I'm going to click on this double arrow icon on the top of the toolbox in order to expand it to 2 columns so I can see this row of icons down here below the fill and stroke options. So make sure the fill is active, incidentally, and then notice you have the option of assigning a solid color or a gradient or none. And by the way, these all have keyboard shortcuts that are right in a row on an American keyboard of comma for a solid color, period for a gradient, and then the slash key for none. So that's one way to work. And notice as soon as I assign a gradient, I end up bringing up the gradient panel over here on the left-hand side of the screen. All right, I'm going to switch back to the single column toolbox. The other way, by the way, to bring up the gradient panel is to go to the window menu and choose the gradient command. Obviously, we don't want to do that, however, when the panel is already up on screen. All right, now you may initially see the gradient panel expressed as a single gradient ramp, and you can click on it in order to assign a gradient to the shape. Or you can go ahead and expand the panel by clicking on this double arrow icon a couple of times. And then notice, in addition to the ramp, you also have this gradient option right here, and you have the ability to switch back and forth between the fill and the stroke. If this isn't the gradient you're looking for, then you can click the down pointing arrowhead to choose from other gradient swatches that are included along with this document. And these just happen to be the 3 gradients that are included by default with a basic RGB image. Let's say I want to start with gold dust, even though these aren't really the shades of orange we're looking for, but it'll give us a start anyway. So I'll go ahead and click on that gradient, and it gets assigned down here to the gradient ramp. Now notice these color stops below the gradient slider. You can drag them to move around and thereby change the appearance of the gradient assigned to the selected object. You can also dial in the location value. So for example, if I click on this color swatch, I could go ahead and dial in a different location, such as let's say 50%, in order to move it to the middle of the gradient. You also have these midpoint skew options right here, these tiny little diamonds. And if you grab one of those and drag it around, you'll change the speed at which one color stop transitions into another. So right now we're seeing that things transition rapidly right at the beginning and then slowly there at the end. If we wanted to reverse that course, then I could drag this midpoint skew closer to this final color stop. You can also delete a color stop by clicking on it And then you could click on this trash icon if you want to, or you can just go ahead and drag the color stop down in order to get rid of it. To add a color stop, just go ahead and click right underneath the ramp. And when you move your cursor to the right location, you can see a little arrow with a plus sign next to it, at which point I could just go ahead and click in order to set a color stop. To change the color of that stop, just go ahead and double click on it, and that'll bring up either your RGB or CMYK values. And then you could dial in a completely different color if you like, and that color will be reflected here inside the document window, assuming, of course, that you're working on a selected object. Two other options you should know about are your ability to change the angle of the gradient. So rather than having it flow at 0 degrees, which is horizontal, I could change it to 90 degrees for a vertical gradient. I can also switch the type from linear to radial. So those are the two types of gradients that you have inside Illustrator. And those are the basics of assigning and modifying gradients inside Illustrator. I know I threw a lot at you, but we're going to have plenty of time to review these options over and over again as we create our cheerful, shiny emoji.